You couldn't do this, but for her, twisting flesh and bone seems to be a breeze. So can she hold a painful pose in a scanner long enough for us to see inside a contortionist?
If she moves, we don't get nothing.
A pool ball and a regurgitator. What goes down must come up.
How did that happen?
It's a hard act to swallow.
We order up some answers from the inside of a pig.
This would be the heart.
He has a taste for steel.
1, 2, 3.
The trip from teeth to stomach is the anatomy for a disaster.
Sword sawing is extremely dangerous.
After trying it, I can say, you couldn't do this. They look like us. They wear our clothes. Each one exactly the same as the next. But we humans differ from one another. Some remarkably so. They can take their bodies to the max. How far is that? Well, let's just say you couldn't do this. Have a look at a woman who makes these guys look like stiffs. Her name is Zlata. It means gold. And there's no doubt this Russian is the gold standard in contortion. She's warming up for an MRI unlike any you've seen. It amazes the technicians. They haven't seen the best part yet. For the test, she bends into a painful pose called the triple fold, and then crams into a tube only 71 centimeters in diameter. She must hold this unmoving for 4.5 minutes. That's how long it takes to get a clear image. If she does it, Dr. Klaus Posberg will get a rare glimpse into what's behind the bending. But is this too difficult, even for her? To answer that, let's go back 6 hours in time. I found Freyung in Bavaria, Germany, a town of quaint buildings and cobblestones. I'm supposed to meet Zlata, the contortionist, right about now. I don't see... Oh, she must be around here somewhere. Well, maybe I'll try over here. From a suitcase the size of a bar fridge comes a 1.76 meter body weighing 54 kilos. She says it's easy.
So you could do a smaller suitcase?
Ja, also ich denke, ich kann in das kleinere Suitcase reinkommen, aber natürlich alles hat seine Grenzen, weil ich habe ja auch einen Körper und ich kann nicht meine Knochen benden, sondern wirklich nur die Gelenke.
Zlata puts on a show. She starts slowly, call it a warm-up. The real jaw-droppers are coming up soon.
Als ich 4 Jahre alt war,
When I was 4, our kindergarten teacher said, "Okay, children, let's make a bridge." All the other children kept trying and rolling on the floor. I bent over, and my feet were side by side with my hands. They all were surprised and spellbound.
She makes a living at this because her ability is so rare. It's not even in her family.
My sister only has flexible fingers. She can't even do the splits.
You know, I'm standing right here, and it's still almost impossible to believe that she can do that.
Now, even more extreme stuff.
Everything is squeezed, and I can feel every single organ. The blood flow is restricted. I feel my heart pounding.
Her breathing is always loud and labored.
Breathing is everything for a contortionist. If you try to hold your breath, you risk tumbling over. So I breathe. That's something you absolutely must learn.
Sometimes her hand or foot trembles as she fights to hold a pose.
Yes, because it's very strenuous. I have to hold the poses long, and the muscles get into overload.
So she trains 3 or 4 times a week, 4 to 5 hours a day, because it takes more than just flexibility.
Not only flexibility, the power and the strength of the body to doing these difficult positions.
Dr. Alexander Ball, professor of pathology, gives us a hand to better understand the secrets of contortion. First, there's the joint where the leg meets the pelvis.
Now, the joint shape dictates how much of a range of movement you're able to get. Now, you can see that it's a very shallow joint. So as a result, you're going to have a great deal of freedom of movement.
Ligaments connect those bones. These tissues connect all bones.
You're able to stretch these ligaments by practice.
Third, there's the spine, especially the lumbar region. The discs are seen here in blue.
A contortionist would have a more flexible spine by separating the bones that would otherwise limit the movements of the spine, separating them out with a larger intervertebral disc.
Dr. Ball uses an oxtail to show how the disc can be made larger. Into the disc's center, called the nucleus pulposus, he injects water.
And now we have a larger and thicker intervertebral disc that would increase the spacing between the vertebrae.
Zlata adds liquid to the center of her discs by constant bending.
As you flex and extend the spine, then the space between the between the adjacent vertebrae will increase.
Finally, the protrusions on the vertebrae are called processes. This is how they look in the lumbar or lower spine.
The spinous processes of the vertebrae are sitting up, away from one another, so that then the muscles are able to exert a force on those vertebrae that allows them to extend and flex.
Compare that to the thoracic region or middle spine.
When you look at 2 thoracic vertebrae together, you'll see that the downward positioning of the spinous processes doesn't allow for very much flexion and extension.
Which brings us back to what makes this attempt so difficult. Zlata once injured herself when she bent the vertebrae too much.
Da kamen die Knochen aufeinander.
The bones touched
und da
the
haben wir einfach
bones, and
unsere
the muscles were
Muskulatur
squeezed,
zwischen den Knochen
causing
zerquetscht.
bleeding.
Das gab da eine Einblutung.
Her manager husband is worried. He paces at the back of the room. After just a minute, Zlata squeezes her handheld alarm. She wants out.
Maybe we can do something more easy.
Then that position.
Yeah.
It's a simpler pose, but still tough. To top it off, an insert with imaging coils wedges her in. The team hurries to the controls. Every second counts now.
How long does she have to hold it?
Around 4 minutes.
At 1 minute, the machine calibrates. At 2, the tension goes up.
Looks like she might be having a little trouble.
At 3, the technician has to encourage her to keep her spirits up. At 4, the images start to develop, but
If she moves, we don't get nothing.
Why?
at 5, she is still holding. Finally,
Okay, over.
Zlata stayed rigid for a lot longer than expected.
Congratulations.
Just how long becomes clear as she slowly unfurls. 5 minutes and 50 seconds.
That was hard, eh?
Yes, it was really hard to hold it so long.
I show you the images.
They are quite a sight.
And these are the discs here, what you see here.
Their shape shifted dramatically.
The form of the disc is really unusual in this position. So you see it's not only opening, it's also
Shifting? Like
shifting.
one part of it is
Yeah,
shifting?
it's shifting.
Her spine is almost doing a complete turnaround.
That is Zlata. Gold. The name says it all. When we tell you what's next in the show, we say, coming up? Well, something really is coming up.
Everything goes into my stomach.
The claim that something is going into the stomach seems a little bit incredible.
And later, what a grip. He can lift 180 kilos with just his fingers. This is how he cuts a deck of cards.
Boom.
Find out if boxing gloves can defeat his killer grip. Martin Lorello could turn his head 180 degrees. In this position, he couldn't breathe, but remarkably, he could drink.
Good afternoon!
100 college students and I have come to see something truly bizarre.
There's nothing I can say to prepare you for what you're about to see. So please, just put your hands together and welcome on stage the ladies, Starr.
If people ask you, what do you say?
I swallow things and bring them up again. First reaction is, ugh.
Blondie, check that light bulb for me, would you please?
A light bulb is the appetizer.
Everything goes into my stomach.
Is any of what we all see when you perform an illusion?
No, 100%.
I have some money here. Sir, would you kindly take this money?
Absolutely, no sleight of hand whatsoever. And this is why I use the audience to come up and put the money inside, because if I stood there doing it myself, they'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's eat money. Number one.
He ingests 5 coins.
Kindly put out your finger.
Then once it's verified as liquid soap,
Real?
he takes a few swigs and then adds water.
When everything is inside, I'm able to manipulate and put what I want, where I want, while I'm speaking all the way through the entire act.
Then something that's incredibly bad for you, cigarette smoke.
Got a belly full of money, I got a belly full of smoke. Would you like money or smoke? Tell me what to bring you back. How many shall I bring? 3. Number 1.
He claims to control his esophagus. That's the body part that leads to the stomach.
It's like a valve that I can open and close it whenever I like. You know, if you hold a balloon full of air with your fingers and you can release it when you like, exactly the same thing that I can do with the esophagus.
By the way, the esophagus is not where he's pointing.
A pool ball. Check that ball, sir.
Next comes a British pool ball. It's 56 millimeters in diameter. That's the biggest object in his act.
He's got all kinds of stuff in his stomach.
Do you want to? Of course you don't. Do you think you have any
I
option?
believe what's in there.
No.
These stunts are simply incredible.
It's a hard act to swallow.
Our professor isn't biting, and he serves up a demo to show why. If you're squeamish, look away.
Here we're able to see on the pig's pluck.
The insides of a pig are similar in size to a human's.
This would be the heart. And then immediately behind it, a muscular tube.
That's the esophagus. At the bottom of it is where the stomach attaches. So when we chew food, we form a bolus or ball. When we swallow, it travels down to the esophagus, which takes over control.
Kind of makes its own decisions.
The esophagus is not open like a garden hose. It's more like a deflated balloon.
We can put in some retractors and dilate it to its maximum diameter.
And even that is too small for an object like this. It's the approximate size of the billiard ball.
The claim that something is going into the stomach seems a little bit incredible.
So once inside the mouth, where does the billiard ball go and wait to be retrieved? Professor Ball says the tongue fills most of the oral cavity. So there are 2 possibilities. Split the model head in half, and you can see the first, the nasopharynx.
The space measures about 10 or 15 mils of liquid.
Too small a volume for the ball. The other possibility is at the back of the throat. Sometimes these muscles split, creating a pocket or a diverticulum.
It's something that happens in the elderly.
But the largest is about 15 milliliters.
A lot smaller space than could accommodate a large object like that.
It's time to swallow a goldfish.
There is no fish. Nothing.
Next, in goes the billiard ball. And out comes the fish. Followed closely by the ball.
Do you have anything unusual anatomically that might help?
Nothing.
Would he be willing to undergo an X-ray or MRI as he did his stunts?
I'd need to speak to my manager about that because he's the one that controls everything. It'd really be up to him at the end of the day.
I won't allow that. Stevie wouldn't object to it, but the thing is, because it's muscle control, I suspect that a good yoga would be able to do it, replicate it, if he knew what muscle Stevie was using. And I don't want that to happen.
I think that the Regurgitator is the most amazing because it's the one that defies explanation the most.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Stevie Starr.
I can't hold my breath as long as they can, but in this next segment, I am going to try.
It's very dangerous if you do it alone.
I go under to feel the pain. And later, the human cannonball.
Getting shot out of the cannon, it's a very violent thing.
3, 2, 1, fire!
Jaleesa Thompson can popperize 12 millimeters beyond their sockets. Some people can pull their eyelids back so far, it pushes the eyes forward. Nick Linder has a remarkable record. He swims 84 meters in 86 seconds, under ice, while holding his breath. How is that possible? These researchers will try to uncover his secret.
I propose that breath holders have a very good mind control of their respiratory system.
A cooling mat goes on the heat sensors of his face. It replicates the coldness of the water. An instrument analyzes his breath. Others track his vital signs. He can't cycle less than 80 RPM.
Just a little bit faster.
He must go until he just can't do it anymore. The bike is programmed to make it harder and harder to pedal.
Just continue like this.
At each new level of difficulty, his blood is tested. They're especially interested in his carbon dioxide levels. As you'll see, CO2 plays a big role in breath holding. Before we get the results,
I have to collect blood again.
Let's learn more about breath holding, also known as apnea. Our guide is a diver who tags sharks while holding his breath. William Winram does it to show a different side to the animal.
Imagine somebody getting in the water and interacting within a meter without any aggression.
And that's because scuba diving bubbles make noise. They're foreign to the water. Breath holding is quiet, more natural. He's held his breath for 8 minutes while floating face down. That's called static apnea.
It's very dangerous if you do it alone.
A safety diver will watch him very closely. Breath holders without safeties have died doing this.
They push a little bit too far and they black out.
No one was there to get their faces out of water.
You'll inhale water. That's it. You're dead.
He begins by breathing through a snorkel. I'm watching carefully. After William is done, I'm going to give it a try. The breaths are deep and relaxed.
Most people think that it's the last breath that you take before you do your static that you're using, and it's not.
For 6 minutes, he does what's called a breathe up.
521.
During the breathe up, you're oxygenating your blood and your tissues. So that's the oxygen that you're using in the static breath hold.
The snorkel comes out, and something called the mammalian dive reflex kicks into high gear.
If you immerse your face in cold water, your heart rate slows.
A slow rate means that he uses less oxygen and produces less carbon dioxide.
The blood vessels in the arms and legs constrict, pumping the blood back to the core of the body. And it gets prioritized for the heart and the brain and the lungs. You're completely relaxed. You're trying to just let yourself drift off. It goes from that period of bliss or relaxation to work, to struggle, to fight.
In his body, the carbon dioxide levels are climbing.
The urge to breathe is triggered by high levels of CO2, not low levels of oxygen.
He feels it in his diaphragm.
That's the muscle that separates chest and abdomen.
I get what's called a contraction, so my diaphragm literally tries to breathe. Of course, I don't allow it to.
Thanks to years of yoga and training, his mind resists his body. He's around 4.5 minutes and still going.
At the end of it, I'm getting contractions like this.
He moves to the edge and opens his eyes to check his peripheral vision.
450.
I usually have peripheral vision from here to here. I'm fine. After that, it's lights out. If I start to see my peripheral vision move,
5.
then I surface. I'm okay.
5 minutes and 3 seconds.
That was nasty. The contractions came on at 2 minutes.
Usually, they start at 4.
The first urge to breathe is like, I have to breathe, and you're just sitting there going, no, it's just CO2. Shut up, don't move, just stay there. It's horrible. Then it's really how much suffering you can endure.
I'm about to find out. How long can I hold my breath?
Training time.
We'll get to that, but first, back to Nick.
Let's do 1 more minute, let's go.
Nick needs encouragement. He's been cycling for 30 minutes.
I'm all the time amazed when I see them.
What about his blood gases? Let's put it this way. If he was hooked up in intensive care,
every alarm would be ringing.
When asked how tired he is on a scale of 1 to 10?
10.
10.
What we propose is that they have a higher tolerance of CO2 levels than the normal subjects have.
They also breathe differently from you and me. When we have a lot of CO2, right away, we breathe deeply and more often. Breath holders do that much later. Back at the pool, I'm standing up to do my breathe up.
The deeper your state of relaxation or meditation, the lower your heart rate goes.
Mine is going the other way, peaking at 120. My somewhat frantic entry doesn't help.
You don't want to do a big movement. Your heart rate starts to jump up.
I get my heart rate down to the 60s, but it's much too late. My time? 1:07.
That's not bad, first time.
Thanks. On my next go, I try to relax.
1:30.
I couldn't go any longer than that.
And what's the longest static apnea in the world? Over 11 minutes. Up next, the human cannonball. Any shot could be his last shot.
You know, everything has to be perfect.
But something about this shot has him worried.
So it's not going to be a real comfortable landing.
Back in the 20s, Frank Richards could sure take a hit. That spring-loaded gun fired a ball weighing 47 kilos. They called him Captain Cannonball. Chachi Valencia, the human cannonball, flies faster than he drives.
55 miles an hour.
That's his gun, a mortar 10 meters long.
I feel a little bit nervous.
That's because he's rusty. He's been off for a while.
Getting shot out of the cannon, it's a very violent thing.
Now he has to shoot nearly the length of a hockey rink.
It's my life, you know, I take this very, very, very serious, and, you know, everything has to be perfect.
Perfect means arriving early to get the cannon inside.
It's gonna be really cold outside. I have a lot of hydraulics, lines. I don't want anything to freeze on me.
So how exactly do those hydraulic lines make the cannon work? He won't let us see up there.
We keep it a trade secret, you know.
He'll only level with us about gunpowder. Does he use it?
No. No.
And so begins the setup. First, he measures the height.
The building here is only 56 feet.
He adds that to his speed and distance to figure out the angle of his shot.
If you're gonna do a very long shot, you don't wanna have a low angle, you know, because you come in the net like a car crash.
So what's the angle here?
¿Dónde está? 38.4. Okay.
That angle brings him 5 feet from the ceiling.
You wanna have a little bit of an arch to your flight. It's a much softer landing. You wanna be 40 plus. So it's not gonna be a real comfortable landing.
Next comes the net and the rigging. Chachi calls it a heavy-duty nylon fishnet.
This is my lifeline right here.
The placement of the net must be perfect.
140 feet. The front of the net has to be flush with the front of the cannon, so my aim is directly in the center of the net.
Now he secures the net.
Over there.
He uses ropes and pulleys, wires and carabiners, sometimes even shock absorbers.
We have 6 points on the net.
Each point attaches to the ground.
We're getting there.
It must be directly opposite
that corner there
to the one on the other side.
Is right here. Ugh.
Sometimes that makes for quite a chore. Finally, each point must stretch the net out with exactly the same tension.
If the net is off anyway, it shoots you different directions, you know, and I've had it where I landed on the net and I felt like half my body went one way and the other half of my body went the other way, you know? 1, 2, 3, lift.
The net is raised up 6 meters. That's so he doesn't bottom out and hit the floor.
It's 5 Gs coming out of the cannon, but you know, it's probably 5 Gs or more coming down.
Now he checks to see if everything is set up right. He lashes together 4 sandbags to make a dummy that weighs 72 kilos.
The dummy is a little bit lighter than me, so if the dummy can make it, then I know I'm gonna make it because I go a little bit lower and I go a little bit shorter.
And now the test.
Oh, got plenty of room. That was pretty good. That was great, actually. Landed in a perfect place. We're ready.
It's 15 minutes to blast off. Chachi stretches for an hour every day. Before the shot, it's just a few minutes. What more could he do?
Use the muscles and tense the muscles as much as possible so that when the acceleration occurs, the acceleration forces are going to be resisted by the force of the muscle.
Earlier, Chachi showed us that's exactly what he does when he's ready to launch. What else can he do?
Use whatever you have in your body as a natural shock absorber, but unfortunately, you don't really have a lot.
One he does have is the foot.
And you can see that there are 2 arches of the foot, a longitudinal arch and a transverse arch.
The arches are held by ligaments.
The ligaments actually stretch out a bit and provide a springing action as the longitudinal arch of the foot absorbs some of the weight of the body and the shock, including the shock of being pushed out of the muzzle of a cannon.
The actual shooting out, I mean, so far I haven't had any problems. But the net, that's where I've had some back problems, some neck problems. It's showtime. When it's time for the cannon, you know, they announce me, that whole back thing, that's gone. It's a lot of adrenaline. I'm just in a complete different zone.
But one worry always worms its way in.
It's a machine. Things can happen.
Cannonballs have died. There's always a countdown.
5, 4.
Gives me a few seconds to prepare myself. It's a big jolt. You're going from a very violent thing to a very quiet and, you know, peaceful, flying through the clouds kind of a feeling.
But then he must focus on turning forward so he lands on his back.
The landing is the dangerous part. You turn over late, you're gonna land on your head on the net. If you overturn too early, you land standing up. You break your legs.
He turns a little late, landing more on his shoulder than he'd like. He says he's okay.
Felt so soft, so nice.
But that could be the adrenaline talking. Tomorrow, he could well have yet another tweak. For now, he enjoys the applause of those who admire what the human body can do.
Chachi, the Rocket Man, Valencia.
There are more than 7 billion of us here on Earth, but only a few dozen swallow swords for a living.
What makes it so difficult and deadly? We look inside a sword swallower.
All of a sudden it went in and dropped about 6 inches, and I pulled it out quickly and I thought, ugh.
In the 40s, Mirandajo had piercings like no one else. There was no blood, but lots of water, a human sprinkler. Water ran through the hollow foils, which ran through him. Dan Meyer once had a safe job.
Well, I worked in the music business for several years.
Now, he has one of the world's most dangerous. Dan has a taste for steel.
We call ourselves blade glummers or steel slurpers.
He swallows swords down into his stomach.
Sword swallowing is extremely dangerous. We know of 29 deaths over the past 100 years or so from sword swallowing injuries. So how are y'all doing tonight? Everybody good? I'm going to attempt to swallow this particular sword.
At his show, he emphasizes the danger.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is extremely dangerous. It could kill me. I hope you enjoy it. You can puncture the esophagus, the lungs, the heart, the stomach. Most of the danger is actually going in and from the tip of the sword. Give him a big round of applause.
Dan calls me to the stage for a close-up look at how he does it.
So, Jay, I'd like you to take a look at that sword. Verify that is a real blade.
Basically, think pizza. The sword goes down the same way our food does. Trouble is, a blade is bigger and a lot more rigid.
I slide the blade into my oral cavity and I press down on the tongue with the sword and it kind of removes it or pushes it forward a little bit. When I get to the back of the throat, I have to repress the gag reflex. Straight up, a little higher.
I check out what he means. The gag reflex prevents us from accidentally swallowing a large object, one that could get stuck in our throat.
The subconscious mind controls all the automatic body reflexes. So you have to actually overcome the subconscious mind through repeated muscle memory. There goes.
That means practice.
It was about 13,000 unsuccessful attempts before I got my first sword down, and then it took another 2 years to get consistent at it, and another 5 years to master it.
What he had to master after the gag was this 90-degree corner.
You end up hitting the back of the throat. It's very difficult to find the proper alignment down in the esophagus.
It's all in the tilt of the head.
I remember the first time I successfully swallowed a sword. All of a sudden it went in and dropped about 6 inches. And I pulled it out quickly and I thought, ugh. And I looked at the sword to see if there was any blood on the sword. No blood. I thought, man, I don't know if I punctured myself. And I actually had to wait until the next morning to check the stool sample to see if there was any blood.
The sword now heads down that red tube. It's the esophagus, the road to the stomach.
And then you have to repress the peristalsis reflex, the 22 pairs of muscles that swallows your food down into your stomach.
Here, he shows his control over those muscles with a stunt called the drop.
You actually kind of swallow it part way and hold it with your esophageal muscles, and then you learn to relax the esophageal muscles and let the blade drop down your throat like this.
Once the sword is in the esophagus, Dan wants me to push it into his stomach.
I have to relax the lower esophageal sphincter, which is a real tight rubber band-like muscle that closes off the stomach. Then I have to repress the retch reflex in the stomach.
I could actually feel when that sword hit the bottom of his stomach. I could. Like it just bumped.
Yep.
It was incredible. It was actually scary.
The next day, we go to a radiologist. A fluoroscope shows that sword swallowing is even scarier than I first thought. That's Dan's heart. And now, here comes the sword.
It runs into the highest concentration of blood vessels in the human body.
The sword is coming down, straight down, and right sitting here in front of it is his heart.
As I slide my blade down, it nudges the heart a little bit to the side. A lot of times you can see the blade beat with the heart like that because it's separated by about 1/8 of an inch of esophageal tissue there.
You can also see it on the X-ray.
It's actually nudging the sword back and forth?
And it's pushing the sword, which is really incredible, but it's pushing the sword back and forth.
That's dangerous territory for the point of a sword.
That's not a spot I'd want to have a point, that's for sure.
No, exactly.
This fuzzy snapshot reminds Dan of the peril.
I've actually held the heart of a sword swallower in my hand and held his sword that punctured his heart.
A pursuit so dangerous does take some precautions. Dan heads up the Sword Swallowers Association. It says to be official, a sword must be 38 centimeters long and 1.27 wide.
If you're swallowing something that's a really tiny little blade, it can puncture much easier than a wider blade.
Most blades and tips are filed down.
My swords are razor sharp. I just happen to use a very dull razor. And I need you to take a look at this and make sure that it looks real to you.
Dan will often ask the audience to authenticate his sword.
Yeah, looks real? Okay.
And then he always licks it.
They might tap it on the edge of a table or something and create a nick or a burr in the sword. If you swallow that sword with a nick in it or a burr in it, it can snag inside of you. It can fish hook. Anybody know what this is? No? No?
But for every precaution, there is this.
What is it? What does it look like to you?
The drive to do new stunts.
It's a giant straight razor.
A razor, a curved blade, scissors, each tougher and tougher on the body. And most dangerous of all, multiple swords.
I punctured my stomach once while swallowing 5 swords, and my stomach retched upwards and caught on the tips of the swords.
He used to think about injuries. Now he just concentrates.
I have to make sure that I focus on each time as if it were the first time, or it could be my last time.
Nah, I'm never going to be as buff as these guys, but they are never going to be able to do what the Destroyer does. He's up next.
In the 40s, Charles Bayerjean could pull a lot more than his own weight. He was an old-fashioned strongman. It's a tradition that continues to this day. He's called the Destroyer. He lifts 180 kilos with just his fingertips. I've come to Montreal because I hear his hand strength is incredible.
Hey, Jay, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad. Come on in. Come and see my gym.
I enter the world of a strongman.
Universe. My toys. Fun.
This is amazing.
Amazing unless you're a tennis ball.
I can push the inside out.
Hey!
Frying pans aren't safe either. So, what's next? Rip a phone book in half?
I see girls doing that kind of stuff, so I try to stay in the Destroyer name, that it's really hard. Not that I don't appreciate when women are strong. I know a lot of women strong, but I go in another category to put it harder.
Like ripping a deck of plastic-coated playing cards.
So you can look at it?
Yep, okay. I'm weakening it.
Yeah, everything's in the fingers and the angle you're gonna put on the deck of cards. If you don't got the right angle, you won't do it. All guys that tear deck of cards know that you gotta have an S in it. So it goes like an S, and you go and boom. As soon as it crack, it goes easy after that. And you go and twist it. And after that, you use your fingers like a scissors. Boom, boom, boom. Follow the track, it's gonna go. And you go and boom. Wow. Boom. And after that, just boom. Yeah.
He did that very slowly so we could follow along.
Everything is in the hand. So even if you have 30 inches of bicep, you don't got no hand, what you gonna do with your bicep? Grip strength, it's a key to open all the doors you need.
Grip strength, to be able to generate force within your hands, you might think is coming from your hand itself, but it turns out that there are very few muscles within the hand itself, and they're positioned so that they're able to pull the fingers apart and to be able to pull them back together again. To be able to rip a deck of cards in half, you need to have some very powerful muscles within the forearm, not within the hand. The muscle located in the forearm then turns into a tendon, the tendons of which go all the way to the ends of the fingers, where they're then able to generate a gripping force.
This is the destroyer at regular speed.
Oh, man, that's amazing.
Even more amazing is this photo. That's the destroyer weighing 130 kilos. At 54 years of age, he dieted down to half that without losing his grip. This is how he trains his grip. He finger pulls 300 pounds. He can do even more on the gripper.
I did one time a few reps with 405 pounds. I let go of the machine because the skin was starting to open in my hand.
So, rip a deck with boxing gloves? No problem.
I want to see this. Wow, man.
His workouts are surprisingly short.
10 minutes, 12 minutes, that's all I need. I don't need to overtrain.
He doesn't do a lot of slow, heavy lifting.
If you go slow, you're gonna have a big muscle, more dense, but less fast.
He wants fast muscles, explosive. He believes one way to get that is to plunge his hand into rice.
Sometimes I'm gonna squeeze the rice and open it back. Sometimes I just jump on the rice to put a lot of pressure on the tip of my fingers. I use a lot of explosion because it's fast. You hit it hard. It's like a punch. If I punch slow, I won't hurt you. If I snap you, boom, it's gonna hurt.
This appears to be a pretty solid spike. I felt like I was bending it, but I wasn't.
I spent 1 year of my life on the same spike. I went like that, a little bit at a time, but it took 1 year to bend it like that. And it goes like this a little bit. Put it in your hand and we squeeze it.
Oh, wow. Check that out.
As you can see, my hand is skinny, so the iron goes right on the bone. You gotta go over the pain. Don't go over the pain, you're gonna stop. You won't do it. Somebody who has good gene, it's dangerous, but somebody whose determination is high, it's deadly.
The destroyer believes he trained his brain to endure.
The brain knows it's gonna bend. So that helps me in my head to say, go for it, it's gonna bend, it's gonna bend.
To keep his brain trained, how many nails must he bend each week?
I bend a spike once a week. I like to do it on the weekend because maybe it's in my head, but when I bend a spike the Saturday morning, oh, the weekend is good, my strength is there. So it's probably mental, but it works.
This demonstration uses an iron rod that's 1.5 centimeters thick. To be sure, there is technique here, as in his other feats, but there's also perseverance, endurance, and above all, strength.
It's actually, although you can't tell by looking at it, pretty heavy too, right?
Yeah.
Very, very strong. Okay. What are you going to do with it?
Bend it on my nose.
You're bending it on your nose.
Yeah. And I think strongmen will always have the place on the planet. Kids like that. Everybody likes that.
I don't even know what to say.
You see a strong man and say, oh, what he's gonna do? Let's go see. We like strength.
As we've seen, it's dangerous to push yourself to the very edge and incredibly daunting. You have to have an extraordinary body and a powerful mind. Very few can do it. Most of us are happy just to watch.